So, in layman's terms, we work on making food easily accessible for everybody. And we don't just fill bellies, it's about healthy food. And we do it in a way that is mindful of our environment and thinking about that whatever things that we do to this earth that other people are going to inherit, just like we've inherited what we have now. So being mindful about those practices as part of the food system, because we all know land and the food system are so interconnected and they both need each other. So I will let Janet take it from here, but we'll share a little bit more about what we do at the end because we're always looking for volunteers and there's only 3 full-time staff at Growing Places and 6 part-time staff. And we have about 150 volunteers. So it's really our volunteers who make us tick. And so we're always looking for people to help us in many capacities. So at the end, we can ask if anyone's interested in connecting more. But we really do this just to help increase awareness around healthy food access and environmental sustainability. And we love the Bigelow Public Library. They're a model for how all libraries should be in partnerships with community-based organizations. So Janet, take it away, lady.
Sure. Hey, everybody. So my name's Janet Edwards. I'm the Director of Programs and Operations at Growing Places, and I've been there for about 8 years. I'm 39, so I like to say I've been gardening for 39 years because I feel like I have been pulling weeds and digging in the dirt since I was tiny. Aeroponic gardening, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, is something relatively new to Growing Places. So I feel like we're in a really good spot to talk about it because we are just at, I would say we're over the hump of our learning curve, right? So we have gone through some of the trials and tribulations of the early stages of getting used to it, and now things are moving pretty smoothly. So it's a really good time to share our experience because we can still relate to the questions that you might have, but we have a lot of information to tell you about it. One of the first things that we thought we would do was start by talking about what it's like to try to build your own system. The system we're going to show you tonight is one that we purchased through a company called Juice Plus. It's called Tower Garden. And we came to it sort of secondarily. We thought, hey, we can make our own. We can do this. We can build one for, cheap. It'll be easy. We've got space. And we wanted to share with you a bit of what that process looked like before we show you how lovely the Tower Garden is. So Anne, let me share my screen so that you can see some photos. All right, are we showing okay, Anne?
Yeah, great. Everyone can see, thumbs up. Good.
I'm gonna see if I can start the slideshow for you so it's full screen. All right.
So a little background, like Janet said, we had purchased a few tower gardens for the public schools in our region through grants, and we were doing education. And we were really interested ourselves in seeing could we create our own model, because we knew, a little bit about this tower garden that we were working with, which is the model that we're going to end up talking about and showing you how we build it and put it together and how it works and share a little bit of the intricacies of it. But we wanted to do a little experimentation and see what it was like to build our own. So I'm going to take you through that process of how that happened and what we did and who we did it with and what kind of expertise is needed. So next slide. Okay, so you can see what we did is we bought PVC pipe that is obviously food ready, right? So potable water is graded for potable water. And then you can see the blue are PEX, which are essentially tubing specifically for water systems, right? So it's specifically for potable water. And then what we did is we took the PVC pipe and we cut holes in them in order to create the plugs of where we were going to put our little plants. And if you look at the picture on your right, that big, huge tub and Denise, I'll share a little bit about this model. We do not have a handout because we have a much better model that we're going to share with you. And a hydroponic garden. Yes, Janet, do you want to just give a definition of the difference between a hydroponic garden and a traditional garden, and then aeroponic too, obviously?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something that we want to go into. So what Anne is describing for you is actually going to be an aeroponic garden, like AERO, aeroponic, because the plant's root systems are not fully submerged in water. A hydroponic system has the plants submerged, the root systems themselves submerged in water with nutrients in there. There are a lot of different models for how that's done. We have experimented with aeroponics, where the plants hang in the air somehow. They're suspended, usually in little cups, and then water is rained over them. And that's sort of what differentiates the two.
Thanks, Janet.
Sure.
So they do not use soil is really a very general difference, and they can be grown indoors. And so you're so welcome. And so we decided that we were going to do this aeroponic style garden because that is what these tower gardens that we were purchasing were like. So that big tub in that right picture is a water storage tank, right? Where we were gonna, because there's lots of water that moves through this system. So this either has to have some sort of moving water source, right? Running water consistently in and out, or you have to have a very large storage tank to be able to keep up with the scale that you're gonna be running through. And it's obviously based on the size of what your garden is going to be. Go to the next slide, please. And so this is what ended up coming out of our little experiment. So you can see we built a frame for it. If you look, also made of PVC that did not need to be potable, so it's a little less expensive. And then we used elbows and T's and all different connections to make the actual hydroponic system or aeroponic system, sorry. And then the little black cups are what holds, and we're going to talk about the medium that you plant in order to make your little seedlings grow. Is in the middle. And then we bought grow lights, and you can see we zip tied them. So we did this in a very rudimentary way. And I'm trying to remember exactly, we had around 112 or so plugs that we were able to get into this system. So about 112 plants we could grow. Now, let me tell you the problems with it. Number one, you can see the shape of the cups where the plants go do not match up exactly with what the shape of the actual cup is. So there's room for water to spurt out. And remember I showed you the blue PEX pipe? We had to poke holes, tons of holes in the PEX pipe, drill holes with a drill throughout. So when the pump would come on in the system, and we're going to talk about this, what kind of things you need for the aeroponic tower garden, you have to have a pump to get the water up and into the plant system, right? You have to have the ability to pump the water through the system, that it was forceful, and it would have the water shooting out all over the floor. So it would be flooding the space that you're in. So that is this design, right? And so I did not make this myself. My husband, who is very handy and one of the trustees of reservations, two of the trustees of reservations, one who does plumbing and electrical work, helped us build this. So this was not, just kind of a do-it-yourself project. We had very skilled people helping us do it, but there are certainly flaws in the system. The other thing that was really interesting is when we built it, we also added a water filter to it because my husband thought that, we wanted to make sure that everything was safe. And when we added the water filter, we realized, we were like, why aren't the plants growing? Well, the water filter, I figured out eventually, was basically sucking all the nutrients out of the solution that you have to put in to make it grow, the grow solution that goes in. And so it was leaching out essentially. And I don't know exactly what nutrient it was. It could have been potassium, magnesium, calcium. I'm not sure which one, but it was leaching out some or all of the nutrients. And so it was starving the plants essentially. So all they would get to is like their seedling stage, and then they wouldn't go on. The minute we removed the water filter, they took off. So that's kind of the fun trials and tribulations of this system. The other thing is that tank down there you can see is huge. And when the water is stagnant, it really builds up algae. And so it really, really, really needs cleaning quite often because it's, like I said, it's pretty stagnant. So you need to make sure that you have a way or a method to clean out this massive tank with hundreds of gallons of water, which weighs, I don't even want to tell you how much. So, and it was in a basement setting. So that's kind of the overview of us doing our like do-it-yourself tower garden system. And now Janet is going to talk and give a lot more technical assistance around this and share what we really recommend when you're doing this.
Sure. So yeah, so we tried it ourselves and it looked like it was going to be cheap and easy, and it was a lot of work. And I think it's important to just reiterate what Anne said. We didn't do it without some people who knew what they were doing. We didn't just wing it, and it was still pretty challenging. And it required a fair amount of space. So we ended up going with a prefabricated kit, the Tower Garden, and it has been leaps and bounds easier than anything we've attempted on our own. So the Tower Garden kit is aeroponic, not hydroponic. The aeroponic root system, like I say, it sits in the air and water rains over it. Like Anne mentioned, everything that is being rained down over the root systems is not really water alone, it's water with nutrients that have been added. So part of this process is adding nutrients to the base of your tower garden and letting that provide nutrition. One thing that I wanted to mention before we show you the video and we can talk through the details of how this thing goes together is that you can grow almost anything in a tower garden, but not everything. So when it comes to your fruits and veg, you can grow any leafy greens, and leafy greens far and away grow the best. Our lettuces, our spinach, our kale, even our bok choy. The bok choy is beautiful. Things grow really, really well. You can grow fruiting crops, tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, what have you. It's harder. You're going to see when we show you pictures, if you picture growing a tomato plant, a leggy vine of a tomato plant, you can do it, but you need to have support for your plants growing out of a tower garden the same way you need support for plants growing in a soil-based garden. So depending on where you're thinking about putting a system like this, you want to think through how you would support the plants you're going to grow. If you're thinking of salad greens, you are golden. You don't need any more space or any more support. But if you're thinking, oh, this is great, I'm going to grow my tomatoes here, or my winter squash and pumpkins, that's when you're going to want to think through. So something people ask us often is if this is something they can do indoors, if it can go outside, what's the deal? Truth is it can go either place. They are movable, they have wheels, so you can keep it indoors during the winter, which is one of the main benefits, right? You can grow year round because you get perfect conditions. Or in the summertime, if you want to, you can wheel it outside and it'll grow just fine outside too. Personally, the whole benefit for me of this system is that it is hands-off and simplified. Once you take your tower garden outside, you're exposing everything to the elements, you're exposing everything to pests, and you are essentially making your job a little bit harder than it would have been if you just kept it in the basement. So it's totally up to your own preferences. It can be used in either setting, but my recommendation is make life easy, grow your salad indoors. We also get asked a lot of questions about whether or not this is organic. It is not organic growing because you do have to add essentially a fertilizer to the water source. So you are adding chemicals to the source. Same chemicals that your plants are going to find in the soil, but not in what most people understand as an organic setting. So just be mindful of that. Perfectly safe, same nutrients, but not what I would classify as organic gardening. All right, I want to show you the video. Bear with me one moment while I share my screen. All right, can you see this okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So we are going to talk through as we go. We did a video, is it just last weekend?
Yes.
Yeah, so Ann and
It
I
was
are
after we delivered Jones and Marie's produce that we went and did this.
everybody's CSA kits. So at the tail end of the day, Ann and I and Chaim, who is actually the trustees staff who helped build the Aeroponic do-it-yourself version, he helped us. And while we built, the Bigelow Library staff filmed for us. So this is a joint effort. So your kit comes with instructions. Everything is really well laid out. And like, I don't work for Juice Plus, but I've built enough of these tower gardens now that I can tell you that it is really helpful to have the instructions that they give you. And if you pay attention to them, it's very straightforward. All right, so first step, you're working with everything that's been unboxed. We took everything out of the packaging that we were going to need. And this white dome that you're looking at is the base of the tower garden. It's going to house all of the nutrient solution that you're working with. And what we're doing is we're screwing on the wheels that go on the bottom. A lot of times people want to know what tools they need to put this together. And unlike the do-it-yourself version, you don't actually need any tools at all to build this. You can do the whole thing by hand. Tower Garden is trying to make it as easy and accessible as possible. So we just tighten the wheels a bit. You know, everything is plastic. So when you're thinking about gardening, this is something to consider. I always consider the pros and cons of a system like this. You know, the upside is that it gives you all of this flexibility. Downside is everything is made out of plastic and comes heavily packaged. We are unboxing the water pump that goes in the base of the tower unit.
And just comparatively, this water pump is much smaller than the one we had to purchase for the one that we did do it yourself. And that water pump is about $20 probably. And the water pump that we purchased was around $100. And so we'll talk about the cost of each two at the end, but at the end of the day, they're actually not that far off. I really thought our do it yourself would be like lots of cost savings, and I don't think it really is.
I don't think so either, and a lot more hassle. I'm putting the little suction cups on. I spend most of this video sitting on the floor. Got comfy for this. So this little pump goes in the base, and the one thing that we discovered and that some folks at Tower Farm or Tower Gardens told us about that I thought was a really helpful tip once you're working with these is that you want to make sure that the root systems of the plants you're growing, because they grow very vigorously, don't get caught up in the pump itself and clog the function of the pump. So periodically, even though you don't need to for any other reason, it's good to check that your pump is not getting clogged with root systems. I think we forget how big the root systems of each individual plant really are under the soil. And in this situation, you know, there's only so much space for those roots to grow in, so they can get very vigorous. So we've placed it in the tub itself. You saw me put a little knot in the end of the wire. That's just to prevent any water from potentially dripping down the hose and getting to your electrical outlet. So the hose that I'm holding on to now, the little blue hose, is what's going to attach the pump to the full system once it's done. Everything comes packaged. So this is me getting the tag off. This is probably the most effort out of everything that we had to do. So it screws into the pump itself. And again, we worked as a team on this, which I think was helpful, but you could ostensibly do this as just one person. So once you have the pump in place, the lid goes on top. And I'm just going to pause for 1 sec. So once that lid is in place, there are these metal rods that are a little hard to see from this angle, but they're metal rods that provide stabilizing support for the tower as a whole. So those just get put in place with wing nuts and bolts, and that's it. And then you're adding on the individual sections of the tower. They're interlocking pieces. They slide on in alternating positions so that each of these little, what do I want to call them? Each little slot for the plants is alternating, and your plants have as much space as possible. And they were very kind in
And
the
they call them
editing.
the plugs.
Yes, yeah. Very kind in the editing because they make it look like we figured the alternating out in no time flat, but it took us a second to get those on straight. So you can see the pieces just fit together. Sometimes because these are mass produced, you do have to use a little bit of muscle just to fit things into place, but for the most part, they just snap in. We're adding a couple more rods because this kit comes with a smaller section on the top, specifically for growing microgreens. So for the larger sections on the base, those are great for growing your larger crops. But if you're planning to grow some very small microgreens or even just lettuce greens, these little top ones that have smaller growing space around them, they work perfectly for that. The piece I'm putting on top right now it's the shower cap, basically. So the water goes all the way up through this tower, up to the top, and then it kind of filters through that top shower cap over the root systems of the plugs. And we are just screwing the metal bits in at the top to make everything sturdy and plumb, because it is important that things are straight. You want the water to distribute evenly inside the tower. If it's not straight and all the water goes to one side, half your plants get watered and half of them don't. And that little thing, that I look so excited about that for a reason. They added that in their recent models, and all it is a little float to tell you when the water in the base of your tower garden is running low. They didn't used to have anything built in to remind you. So that goes in.
No, the pump does not run all the time. We're gonna, you'll see there's a timer and it comes on, and it is not noisy. You know what the noisy part is? It sounds like a little one of those noise machines, those with water, like the waterfall. That's exactly what this thing sounds like.
And you know what's really nice? Their previous models of this unit, they used to have the pump run for 15 minutes and then be off for 45 minutes. But they've actually discovered that they don't need to run the water for that long. So, oh, sorry. Move us along back to where we were. They've discovered that they don't need to water for that long. So now they run the pump for only 5 minutes at a time, 5 minutes out of the hour. And then the other 55 minutes, the pump is off. So we are unpackaging the light system that goes on the top. And do you want to say anything about the light system, or you want me to continue?
No, it's impressive when we put it on. Get ready. It's like it's like when you put the icing on the cake. So get ready for the grand finale.
The lights are probably the most expensive piece in the kit. So we try to be careful and gentle with them. The connections that they use between the lights and the unit that we're pulling out right now, this lovely octopus looking thing, they're probably the most delicate. And if you connect them and something gets moved out of place, it can damage them. We have done this before. So we're very careful about making the connection between the light itself and the unit that sits on the top. So you don't need to put this tower garden anywhere near windows or near any light source as long as you have lights to sit on top like these. There's a timer that comes with this so that you can set the timer to go on for a time that's convenient for you. It just needs to be a set amount of time out of the day. I think we put ours on for, and is it 18 hours or is it less than that?
Yeah, I think in between 14 and 18, we probably err more on the side of 18 because we're trying to produce a lot. But I mean, if you're more relaxed, I don't think you need to do that.
Yeah, it's a range. And I think it depends too on your location. We have ours growing in a basement where they really aren't getting all the light that they could. If you were growing yours on a porch, you might not need that much light. So we're attaching each light one at a time here. You get 4 total, and they come on these really adjustable, I don't know, they're not really springs, but adjustable levers so that you can move the lights as close to the plants as possible. If anybody here has grown their own seedlings from seed before, you know that the light needs to be really close to the seedling itself so it doesn't get too leggy on you. So it's nice to have them be adjustable because you can move it right up close to the seedlings. And they snap into place. Nice. And this is where it is kind of helpful to have another person because these things are gangly. And it sits right up on top. And what you can see there is the timer for the light itself. And it lets you know sort of, you can set it to the right time of day. And we are just fussing with the lights themselves so that they're all nice and close to where the plants are going to be. And the lights are all facing in, but you can move them as needed as the plants grow. So here we're popping in the little cups that will hold the plants once they've been planted. And the reason those are important is because the cup itself is actually what catches the water when it rains down through the tower. So you want to make sure that the rock wool, and we will talk about what that is, sits firmly inside the cup so that it gets nice and moist whenever the water pump is running. And you
so the tower garden is about, I'm 5'3", so it's right about my height. So it's about 5'5", I would say. And though those extensions at the top that Janet was talking about, you can get even taller extensions so you can grow more in one unit. So it can be up to about 7 feet or 8 feet if you want it to be.
And you do need an electrical source for this. You need 2 outlets. Actually, I think with their new pump, they've reduced it, so you really only need the one there. That is the setting for the pump itself, but you do need an electrical source. So wherever you're setting up, you need that.
So the expense is around $7 a month for the electricity. If you have to pay a water bill, it's how big is that tank, Janet? How many gallons?
That one's smaller. The original one was like 40, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think this one's like 25 or 30.
Yeah, I knew it was in between like 20 to.
I want to say it's 25.
So if you have to pay for water, I'd say every 2 weeks you have to just look at it and, maybe fill a quarter of it back up. So you figure that's about 5 gallons, right? So just factor in electricity is about $7 a month because they're LED lights. So they're very, very, very effective and efficient. And then it depends on, like Janet said, how much you're running them to. And then, like I said, also, if you pay for your water bill, then it's just a couple extra gallons. I would say, it's an extra shower a month at the most. So that's probably what I would factor in.
Yeah, and the water usage varies. When you put in a brand new set of baby seedlings, the water usage is minimal. You're not really going to have to refill the tower for at least 2 or 3 weeks. Once the plants start to grow and mature a little bit, they use a tiny bit more water. And like Ann said, every couple of weeks, you do want to stay on it and add another 5 gallons or so But then once those plants mature and are harvested, you're starting over again and the water usage goes down. So there's an average in there that you'll find, and it's relatively inexpensive. So the next step for us, just so you can see, these are the bits that come with the kit. You've got the two solutions, solution A and solution B. Those are two nutrient solutions that get added in equal measure every time you add water to the tank. On the right-hand side, the two little bottles are pH adjuster. So you can test with the pH test kit that they give you with this. And once you've had the system running for a little while, if your pH has gone up, if the pH has gone below ideal, you can adjust it with the solutions that they give you. They also give you a starter seed kit, which comes with the tray, the little black cups. You get this funny looking green stuff with the holes in it, which is your rock wool. And the rock wool is your growing medium. I wanted to share, the rock wool is probably for me my greatest source of conflict when it comes to this. I love the Tower Gardens, but I really don't love rock wool. Rock wool is two kinds of rock that have been superheated and spun together like cotton candy to produce this very spongy, very absorbent, water retentive substance that works beautifully for growing seeds. It's great. It's what like Little Leaf uses to grow all their lettuce greens. Works wonderfully, but it's not compostable. You can add it to soil as an amendment, but it's sort of a permanent addition. It's not going to break down. It's a rock, even though it feels like cotton candy. So that is the one piece that I'll say at Growing Places, we're working on that. We're working with some of our volunteers to see if we can find an alternative, because we don't love it. It produces a waste product for the Tower Garden. If you're using this in a home setting, you're using a really minimal amount of the stuff, and it is not reusable. So I wouldn't stress too much in a home setting. For us running a tower farm with 25 of these towers, I'm very curious about alternatives. We've been looking into, we have little clay pellets. We've been trying to think about how best to operationalize a substitution. So I will put it out there. If anybody knows of anything, feel free to add it to the chat, because I am open to suggestions. So you get your starter seeds. On the side over here, this funny pelleted stuff is vermiculite, if you haven't seen it before. Vermiculite is there to keep the seeds moist. You place it on top of the seeds after they've been planted. It's really not necessary. They give it to you. We have not found that we needed it. Things stay nice and moist in the little kit just as is.
It just plugs up the works, actually. What was really interesting when we did the do it yourself, what would happen is there was so much pressure from the pump that we had, it would actually like push it up back through and then come back into the system, and it would gum up the works. So I would say, if you can get away with it, I wouldn't put the vermiculite in. It seems unnecessary.
I think you can skip it. So you can see all it is popping the seeds right into the hole. You really only need 1 or 2 seeds per slot, because each one is going to get ideal conditions. We, in the beginning, were planting more than that, and we ended up just having to thin them out, and it was extra work. So plant 1 or 2 seeds for each thing you're growing. You can see the rock will kind of absorb all of that water, and you keep the little tray mostly full. And that's the end of our video.
And I sorry, but I'd like to say they planted them on Wednesday and we had sprouts before Tuesday. So the stuff works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just saw there was a question in the chat about how often the rock wool needs to be replaced. It needs to be replaced every time you harvest a plant fully. So if you were to plant a plug of lettuce and you were just doing cut and come again, cut a few leaves for your salad, but let the plant itself stay, you could use that one piece of rock wool for quite some time, really until the plant itself dies. If you harvest the entire head of lettuce in one go, you would pull the rock wool out of the tower garden itself, and then you would need a new cube of rock wool to plant a new plant. So it's every time you grow one plant, which is why I say it's not a really high usage if you're working in a residential setting, but if you're growing many of these, it's something that you might want to consider. Yeah, I was wondering about the cocoa core. Do any of the bits come off of that? Because our concern with this unit is it has a pump built into it, right? And like Ann mentioned, with our filter situation and our do-it-yourself option, it will try to filter out any impurities in the water. So I was trying to decide whether or not core would be something that was too crumbly. I was almost wondering if it would be worth it to use some kind of mesh bag inside of the baskets to hold on to it, just something we could reuse.
Janet, do you want to show the picture of our tower farm and what it really looks like at the end of the day? And then maybe we can talk about, the cost. I've gotten questions about that. And then I got some great questions about also, how can you use this, at a community level to help with food security, which is great. And so we can talk about what we do a little bit.
Sorry, I'm just moving the screen that shows you guys. There you go.
Okay. So this is our tower farm at our offices. So in September, October-ish, we then decided that we had experimented enough and we had written a grant in order to purchase the equipment we needed in order to create our tower farm instead of having an individual tower garden. Because like I said, Growing Places really focuses on food insecurity at the community level. So we really needed to look at a solution in order to create more than just one tower or two towers has. So this tower farm has 20 towers in it. All in, it cost probably $22,000, I'm thinking, with the lights, all of the vats, and I think one of the pictures has with the nutrient vats in it and the propagation unit in order to grow. And so that was the cost. There's the propagation unit in the middle, and you can see in that middle picture, kind of on the left of the picture, that like curly Q looking tube, that's where the nutrients and the water comes into a huge tank, and it mixes the nutrients and the water together to create the solution. And that's the medium that grows. And so what's in there are typical nutrients that you would have in soil. That is the plant food, essentially. So that's, potassium, magnesium, nitrogen, and calcium, and some other nutrients in there that you need to grow, micro and macronutrients. So you can see we have some bok choy on the right picture. We have some lettuce in the middle picture, and we have some kale, and that looks like some more lettuce in the picture on the left. And then that other little tower that has the babies in it, those are tomato plants actually that are growing. So, and Janet can certainly talk more about growing those fruiting vegetables in these tower gardens. But what I wanted to share is just a little bit about how what we do with this produce. So for us, the reason that we did this is because, first of all, in the winter, there's really no infrastructure in our region. Western Mass has some good infrastructure for the local farmers to be growing year round. But in North Central Mass, there's really not a lot. And so we can get root vegetables from farmers from Western Massachusetts and the Worcester Regional Food Hub, like turnips and squashes and beets and carrots and potatoes. onions, but really, unless little leaf, there's really no leafy greens, and all they have is lettuce. They don't have anything else yet. And so we really wanted to be able to fill that gap, because at Growing Places, we have a mobile market and we donate produce, but we also accept SNAP, which used to be food stamps, and the Healthy Incentive Program, which every SNAP household has, and it doubles SNAP dollars for local produce. So households have $40, $60, or $80, depending on their family size with SNAP. So we really wanted to use this so people could use their HIP benefits during the winter time, and not so they just had just root vegetables. We wanted them to have some variety and some leafy greens. And also, actually, you can see at the top there, we grew leeks, and we've also grown some celery in these. So you can really grow a variety of things. We've also grown cabbage in them as well. But that's really what we use our tower farm for, is for growing for donation, but also for that home delivered program so people can use their HIP benefits. We have a TerraCore service member running it right now, and so he's learning with us. But with that said, there's also the reason we wanted to do it is opportunity for year-round volunteerism, because what happens is we have about 100, 150 raised bed garden beds during the summer that we have volunteers and gardeners growing in, and then there's nothing during the winter for them to do. So we really not only wanted to get food access, but we wanted volunteer opportunities as well year round, so people could get their hands dirty or watery during the winter time. So that really is what our tower farm does, but they're great for schools. They're great for any type of, community setting for learning and education. And they're great for any type of organization who's focused on food access and getting food to the masses, and really complementing what's happening with local producers who are using more traditional farming methods. So Janet, do you want to talk a little bit about our tower farms and kind of what we've done in them and what we've grown and how things work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually really glad that this is the slide we're on at the moment for this conversation, because the tower that has all those leafy greens on the left grew beautifully, produced gorgeous kale, everything completely flawless, which if you're used to growing in ground like I am, that is an anomaly. There's always something that has bug bites in it somewhere, something's chomped on something along the way. Everything that you're growing indoors, of course, is so protected that every leaf is perfect. So in terms of an aesthetic threshold for your produce, it is very high. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff. The tower that's right in the center of this slide was our experiment tower. We're like, okay, what else can we grow? Let's see what happens. What happens if we try to grow celery, which can be so finicky outdoors? They said we could grow leeks in this thing. What does that look like? Because don't leeks need to be growing mostly, underground to get that nice white layer? How does that happen? So this was our tower of curiosities. The tomatoes were honestly just as much work in a tower garden as they are outside, and they need hand pollination if you're growing inside. We thought, well, let's see how much work that really is. We were right. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I don't fully recommend growing tomatoes in these things unless you just like playing around with a paintbrush and pretending you're a bumblebee. You can do it, but the yield is just not that high, and it takes just as long, and it takes up just as much space. So we are actually no longer planning to grow any tomatoes in the tower garden. Celery grew beautifully. Best celery that I think I have grown myself. Much better than
it's adorable too, and it's so bright green. Yeah, it's really vibrant.
Yeah, you don't end up with that sort of blanched stuff that you get out of the supermarket, which, that's what I'm used to. But this celery is really fresh. It's nice and young, so it has strong flavor. It's really beautiful. Herbs grow beautifully as well. If you're growing herbs, my recommendation would be to position them either at the top of your tower or at the bottom of your tower so that they can live there for their duration. Your herbs are going to last a lot longer if they're perennials like your thyme or your rosemary, and you want to give them a place where they have plenty of room to grow and they're not going to be completely shaded by something else. So just be mindful about placement on the tower. The leeks
Yeah.
from bust. The leeks, I don't know why they said that leeks could be grown in this, because really leeks need to have too much space underground. And just like every other root vegetable that cannot be grown in this because there's no soil, the leeks were not a success. I think if you were looking at other alliums, you know, if you're looking at chives, they would grow beautifully here, but anything that really needs to go below the soil level, not at all, not at all.
Beth, I see your question. So Beth has a question around ethnic foods. And so growing places, that's near and dear to our heart. So we actually have a couple customers who are from either the islands or Hispanic. So number one, for the Hispanic population, cilantro grows fabulously in the Tower Garden. Obviously, onions you can't do because it's a root vegetable. And then amaranth, which is a Hmong Cambodian crop, grows, it's an African crop. I'm so sorry, grows fantastically. And so we just harvested our first amaranth. It can be green, it can be red, there are a few different colors of it. But our client who's from the islands was so thrilled that we had it. And the other thing is it grows spinach well too. So spinach is oftentimes very well received, like water spinach and things like that in the Hmong population. So that's another one that you can easily grow. But honestly, any leafy green is going to go really well. So if it's an ethnic crop that's a leafy green, it's going to grow really well. We're experimenting with culantro. And so that just has a really high germination rate, really long germination rate. So that's just tough only because it takes so long to germinate and it's taking up space. But we did actually get some with one of our volunteers to germinate, and we're growing it for the Spanish American Center to make sofrito. So we're really excited about that.
Absolutely. And then Anne, did you have one more slide here that you wanted to share just about purchasing? I know we're getting close to our time, and I want to make sure that Marie has time to do her wrap up, but if you wanted to talk a little bit about obtaining these.
Yeah, so Tower Gardens, they're about for that unit, I think it was $970. They can be financed, which is good. So they'll charge you, I think, monthly over 12 months. So, I divided it out. It's $80 a month around if you want to finance it. And growing places, we are absolutely happy to purchase these and be a technical expert for you. So we do that. And also the funding that we earn by doing it just goes back to our programs and helps us to do more and purchase seeds and do things like that and be able to feed more people in our region, which is great. And honestly, we don't make a ton of money on every single one, but we do make a little bit, and every little bit is always helpful to us. So we always ask that if you're going to purchase one and you live in North Central Mass or the region, please purchase it through us because it's the exact same price as if you bought it just directly through Tower Garden or Juice Plus. So if you are interested, please contact us, and that's our information. The rock wool and the solution it uses too, there's a little bit of cost. You can get the rock wool on Amazon, but it's pretty much the same price. I've done cost comparisons. It's not that much different. But the nutrient solution, you really do have to order. That is very like Juice Plus centric because it's been formulated to be this exact plant food that is really optimal for growing through these aeroponic gardens. So, and they last quite some time. So if you get 2 gallons, there's an acid, and a base solution, they really last for about a year. And so, maybe 9 months or something like that. But that's really not the expense of this. It's really just the initial expense of, I think, purchasing the garden.